The first time Rex growled at the black SUV, Luke Mercer barely looked up from his coffee. The second time, he started paying attention. The third time, he realized something was wrong, and by the fourth stop, somewhere deep in the empty highways of eastern Wyoming, he was absolutely certain of one thing. The same black SUV had somehow been following him for nearly 400 miles, not tailgating him, not traveling behind him, not even staying on the same road. Somehow, impossibly, it was simply waiting. Waiting at every rest stop, waiting at every truck plaza, waiting at every lonely stretch of highway where Luke pulled over. And every single time Rex saw it, the dog reacted exactly the same way. The low growl started deep in his chest. The fur along his spine stood straight up, his ears flattened, his eyes locked onto the dark SUV, and he refused to look away. That wasn't normal, because Rex wasn't an aggressive dog, not even close. For 7 years, the Australian Shepherd mix had ridden shotgun across America. Truck stops, busy cities, remote highways, construction zones, crowded fuel stations. Nothing bothered him. Luke had watched children climb all over him, had watched strangers pet him, had watched him nap peacefully beside screaming diesel engines. Rex loved everyone, except whoever was inside that SUV. The strange part wasn't the growling. The strange part was the fear. Because beneath the growl, Luke recognized something else. Rex was scared, and Rex was never scared. Luke stood beside his 18-wheeler at a rest area, west of Casper, while cold Wyoming wind pushed across the empty plains. The black SUV sat nearly 200 yards away. Engine off, windows tinted, no movement, no driver visible. Just sitting there, watching. At least that's what it felt like. Luke squinted. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he was tired. After all, he'd spent 22 years hauling freight across the American West. Long enough to know loneliness could play tricks on a man's mind. Long enough to know that sometimes highways felt haunted, especially after dark, especially when you spent most nights alone. Luke had become an expert at being alone. His wife Emily died 8 years earlier. Cancer. Fast. Merciless. One diagnosis. 9 months later, she was gone. Most people recovered eventually. Luke never really did. He simply kept driving. Thousands of miles. Millions of miles. Every highway became another excuse not to stop thinking. Then one rainy afternoon outside Portland, he found Rex, a skinny, abandoned puppy hiding beneath a fuel tanker. And somehow the dog became the only thing keeping him connected to the world. For 7 years they traveled together. Just Luke and Rex, driver and co-pilot, best friends. So when Rex told him something wasn't right, Luke listened. The dog growled again. The SUV remained motionless. Then suddenly its headlights flickered on. Luke froze. The engine started. For a moment he thought it might drive toward him. Instead, the SUV simply pulled onto the highway and disappeared. Gone, like it had never been there. Luke exhaled. Maybe that was the end of it. Maybe he was imagining things. He climbed back into the cab. Rex jumped into the passenger seat, but kept staring through the window long after the SUV vanished, as if he knew something Luke didn't. 3 hours later, they reached another stop, a small truck plaza outside Rawlins. The sun had begun dropping behind distant mountains. Luke parked, grabbed dinner, returned 20 minutes later, and stopped cold. The black SUV was there again, parked across the lot. Same vehicle, same dark windows, same unsettling stillness. Luke felt a chill crawl up his neck. This wasn't possible. There were dozens of roads between the two locations, dozens of exits, countless vehicles. Yet somehow the SUV had arrived before him again. Rex immediately erupted into growls. Not loud, not barking. Something worse. A warning. The kind of sound animals make when instincts take over. Luke stared at the SUV, and for the first time he noticed a sticker on the rear window. Small, white, faded, a shape resembling a mountain range. Nothing unusual, except he was almost certain it hadn't been there earlier. Or maybe he'd simply missed it. A pickup driver approached Luke. "Everything okay?" Luke nodded. "Yeah." The man glanced toward Rex. "Your dog's been staring at that SUV for 10 minutes. Luke looked at him. "You noticed?" The man shrugged. "Hard not to." Then he lowered his voice. "Funny thing.
What?
That SUV's been parked here since before noon." Luke felt his stomach tighten. "Before noon?" "Yeah," the man pointed. "Never saw anybody get out." Luke looked back at the vehicle. No movement, no lights, nothing. The pickup driver eventually left. Luke remained standing there, thinking, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Then his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He almost ignored it. Instead, he answered, "Hello?" Silence. Then static. Very faint. Very distant. And beneath the static, a dog barking. Luke frowned. "Hello?" The line disconnected. He stared at the screen. Unknown caller. No voicemail. Nothing. When he looked back toward the SUV, it was gone. Again. Just gone. No engine noise. No headlights. No indication it had even moved. Only empty pavement. And for the first time in years, Luke felt genuinely uneasy. That night he parked at a truck stop outside Rock Springs. Wind rattled the cab. Rex refused to sleep. The dog kept lifting his head, listening, watching. At 2 in the morning, Luke finally drifted off. Then Rex exploded, barking, violent, desperate. Luke jolted awake, heart pounding. Rex stood on the dashboard, growling through the windshield. Luke looked outside. The truck stop was nearly empty. Only a few parked rigs. A scattering of lights. Then he saw it. The black SUV, parked directly across from his truck. Closer than ever, maybe 30 feet away. Engine off. Lights off. Motionless. Luke grabbed a flashlight and climbed outside. The cold air hit immediately. The SUV remained still. He crossed the pavement. 20 feet. 15. 10. The closer he got, the stranger he felt. His instincts screamed at him to stop, but he kept moving. 5 feet. Then suddenly the driver's door opened. Luke jumped. A woman stepped out, not threatening, not armed. Just a woman in her 60s. Gray hair, dark coat, tired eyes. She looked surprised to see him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she said something completely unexpected. "You're Luke Mercer." Not a question, a statement. Luke froze. "How do you know my name?" The woman studied him, then looked toward Rex. The dog was still growling, still terrified. Her expression changed, almost sad. "Because I've been trying to find you." Luke felt every muscle tighten.
"What?"
The woman reached slowly into her coat. Luke prepared himself. Instead, she pulled out a photograph. Old, worn, folded. She handed it over. Luke shined his flashlight on the picture and nearly dropped it. The photo showed Emily, his wife, standing beside a younger woman. The same woman now standing in front of him. Luke stared. "What is this?" The woman took a shaky breath. "My name is Claire." Luke looked up. She continued. "I knew Emily." Everything inside Luke stopped. The highway noise, the wind, the darkness. It all seemed to disappear. Because nobody talked about Emily anymore. Nobody. Not for years. Yet somehow this stranger knew her. Knew enough to carry an old photograph across Wyoming. And suddenly the mystery wasn't the SUV anymore. The mystery was why Emily's past had just appeared on a lonely highway in the middle of nowhere. And why Rex hated it so much. Claire glanced toward the dog again. A troubled look crossed her face. Then she whispered something Luke barely heard. Something that made even less sense than everything else. "He remembers." Luke frowned.
"What?"
But Claire was already looking away, toward the darkness beyond the truck stop, as if she feared someone else might be listening. And when she finally spoke again, her voice trembled. "Luke, if Rex is reacting like this, then we're already running out of time." Luke stared at Claire. The cold Wyoming wind whipped across the truck stop, rattling loose signs and pushing dust across the pavement. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Luke held up the photograph. "What are you talking about?" Claire looked exhausted. "Not physically, emotionally. Like someone carrying a burden for far too long. I think we should talk somewhere else." Luke shook his head. "No." His voice hardened. "You've been following me all day?" Claire didn't argue. "You know my wife's name?" Still no response. "You somehow know my dog." The woman lowered her eyes. "And now you're telling me we're running out of time." Luke stepped closer. "Start explaining." For a moment, it looked like Claire might walk away. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Fair enough." She glanced toward Rex. The dog remained inside the truck cab, watching, growling, every muscle tense. Claire noticed. Her expression darkened. He really remembers. Luke felt irritation rising. Remembers what? Claire hesitated, then asked a question that made no sense. How old was Rex when you found him? Luke blinked. Why, please? Luke frowned. A few months old, maybe 3. Why? Claire seemed disturbed by the answer. 3 months. She whispered it to herself, almost like confirmation. Luke crossed his arms. Enough riddles. Claire took a long breath. Then she pointed toward a small diner attached to the truck stop. Give me 30 minutes. Luke considered walking away. Every instinct told him this was crazy, but Emily's photograph was still in his hand, and that changed everything. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other inside the nearly empty diner. A waitress poured coffee and disappeared. Luke never touched his cup. Claire wrapped both hands around hers, as though she needed warmth or courage. Finally, she spoke. I met Emily in Oregon. Luke listened. 20 years ago. The statement surprised him. Luke had known Emily for 19 years, married her for 12. Yet she rarely spoke about her life before they met. Not because she was secretive. She simply wasn't someone who lived in the past. Claire continued. We worked together briefly. Doing what? A non-profit wildlife rehabilitation project. Luke nodded slowly. That sounded like Emily. She had loved animals, especially dogs. Claire smiled faintly. She talked about you constantly after you met. A painful ache moved through Luke's chest. Even after 8 years, hearing Emily mentioned felt strange, like hearing a voice from another lifetime. Claire reached into her bag. She pulled out another photograph, then another, then another. Luke studied them. Emily standing beside rescue animals. Emily laughing. Emily hiking. Pictures he'd never seen before. Pieces of her life that existed before him. For a few minutes, the tension eased. Then Claire ruined it. Emily never told you about Black River. Luke looked up. The name meant nothing. No. Claire nodded. I figured. What's Black River? The woman stared into her coffee, and for the first time, genuine fear appeared in her eyes. Something that should have stayed buried. Luke immediately disliked where the conversation was heading. What is Black River? Claire didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked another question. Do you remember exactly where you found Rex? Luke frowned. Outside Portland. No. Claire shook her head. I mean exactly. Luke thought about it. Rain. Fuel station. Industrial district. Abandoned tanker yard. A terrified puppy hiding beneath machinery. I don't know. Claire looked disappointed. Then she reached into her bag again. This time she produced a folder. Inside were newspaper clippings. Old ones. Yellowed. Folded. She slid one across the table. Luke looked down. The headline immediately caught his attention. Missing transport vehicle found abandoned in Oregon forest. The article was nearly 8 years old. Around the same time he'd found Rex. Luke scanned quickly. The story mentioned a private animal transportation company. A vehicle vanished. Several animals disappeared. Authorities never fully explained what happened. No suspects. No arrests. No resolution. Luke looked up. What does this have to do with Rex? Claire didn't answer. Instead, she slid over another clipping. This one made Luke sit straighter. Private research facility under investigation. The article referenced a company called North Star Behavioral Sciences. Luke read further. Something about animal cognition research. Experimental behavior studies. Federal investigations. The details were vague, almost intentionally vague. Luke looked back at Claire. What is this? She leaned forward, then spoke quietly. 8 years ago, several animals disappeared from a transport convoy connected to North Star. Luke felt confusion building. So, one of those animals was a young Australian shepherd mix. Luke's stomach tightened. No. Claire nodded. Yes. Luke shook his head. No, Rex was a stray. That's what you thought. The diner suddenly felt smaller, quieter. Luke glanced toward the truck outside, toward the dog sitting inside. Impossible. There had to be another explanation. Claire continued. The company shut down after federal investigations. What kind of investigations? She hesitated. Behavioral conditioning. Luke frowned. Meaning? Claire looked uncomfortable. Nobody ever proved anything. That wasn't an answer. What kind of conditioning? Claire swallowed. The kind that should never involve animals. Luke stared. The words hung between them. Uncomfortable. Unfinished. The waitress returned briefly. Refilled coffee. Left again. Neither spoke until she disappeared. Then Claire lowered her voice. "The reason I've been looking for you isn't because of Emily." Luke felt another chill. "Then why?" Claire looked directly at him. "Because somebody else started looking for Rex." Silence. Luke felt his pulse quicken. "What are you talking about?" Claire reached into the folder. She produced a photograph. Recent. Very recent. Maybe taken days earlier. Luke stared. The image showed his truck, parked at a fuel station in Nebraska. Someone had photographed it from a distance. His truck, his license plate, his dog. Luke looked up sharply. "Where did you get this?" "Someone sent it to me." "Who?" "I don't know." Luke didn't believe that. Claire saw the doubt. "I swear." Then she added something worse. It wasn't the only one. More photographs appeared. Different states, different truck stops, different locations. Each showed Luke or Rex or both. Someone had been tracking them systematically for months. Maybe longer. Luke suddenly felt sick. "This isn't possible." Claire's voice softened. "I wish that were true." Luke looked again. The dates were recent, very recent. The newest photograph was only 6 days old, taken in Idaho. His hands tightened around the table. "Who's doing this?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know." "You expect me to believe that?" "No." At least she was honest. Luke rubbed his face. Nothing made sense. Not the SUV. Not the photographs. Not the company. Not Rex. And definitely not Emily's connection to any of this. Then another thought occurred to him, one he hadn't considered. "If you've been trying to find me?" Claire nodded. "How did you know where I was?" The woman looked away. That answer took too long. Luke immediately noticed. "Claire," she sighed, then finally admitted it. "Because somebody was already tracking your route." Luke felt ice spread through his chest. "What?" Claire's eyes met his. "The same people looking for Rex." The diner seemed to fall silent. Every sound faded. Luke realized something horrifying. The black SUV hadn't been following him. Not exactly. The SUV had been following whoever was following him. And somehow Claire had inserted herself between them, like a person desperately trying to arrive before something terrible happened. Luke stared at her. "Why?" Claire's eyes filled with emotion. The answer came immediately. "Because she'd been carrying it for years. Because Emily asked me to." Luke froze. The world stopped. "What?" Claire swallowed hard. "Before she died." Luke couldn't breathe. His wife's name suddenly felt alive again. Present. Close. Claire opened her wallet. Carefully. Slowly. Inside was a folded piece of paper, old, worn, protected for years. She handed it to him. Luke unfolded it. His hands trembled. The handwriting hit him instantly. Emily's. There was no mistake, no doubt. He recognized every curve of every letter. The message was short, very short, but it changed everything. "Claire, if anything ever happens to me, and if someone starts looking for the dog, find Luke before they do. Please." He won't understand why. Not at first, but Rex matters. More than he knows. Luke stared at the page, his vision blurred. For a moment he forgot where he was. Forgot the diner, forgot Wyoming, forgot the mystery. All he could see was Emily's handwriting, a voice reaching across 8 years. A warning she had somehow left behind. Claire spoke quietly. "I kept that letter all this time." Luke looked up, unable to speak. Then Claire said the one thing that shattered whatever certainty remained. Emily knew this day might come. The words hit like a freight train. Because suddenly the mystery wasn't 8 years old. It was much older, and somewhere in the life Luke thought he shared completely with his wife, there had been secrets, big ones. Secrets connected to Rex. Secrets connected to the people now hunting him. And as Luke sat there trying to process everything, neither of them noticed the man standing across the parking lot. Watching through the diner window, watching Luke, watching Claire, watching Rex. The man stood beside a different vehicle, not the black SUV, a silver pickup. Ordinary, forgettable, exactly the kind of vehicle nobody would notice. He watched for another 30 seconds, then raised a phone to his ear and quietly said 4 words. "We found the dog." Then he hung up. Luke didn't know why, but the moment he stepped out of the diner, something felt different. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe 22 years on American highways had trained him to notice things other people missed. Whatever it was, he stopped halfway across the parking lot. Rex was standing in the passenger seat, not sitting, not resting. Standing, rigid, focused. His eyes weren't on Claire. They weren't on the black SUV. They weren't even on Luke. The dog was staring toward the far side of the truck stop, toward a silver pickup. Luke narrowed his eyes. The pickup immediately started moving. Nothing dramatic, no screeching tires, no sudden acceleration. It simply backed out and drove away. Normal, except Rex erupted. The reaction was unlike anything Luke had ever seen. The dog slammed against the window, barking, snarling, desperate, not afraid this time. Furious, Luke hurried to the truck. By the time he climbed into the cab, the pickup was gone. Rex continued staring after it, breathing heavily, every muscle tense. Claire climbed into the passenger seat behind him. "Did you see that truck?" Luke nodded. "You know it?" "No," but her face suggested otherwise. Luke started the engine. "I'm done with half answers." Claire looked exhausted. "I know." "No." Luke pulled onto the highway. "I mean it." The headlights stretched across miles of empty Wyoming darkness. The interstate looked endless, black asphalt cutting through a sea of moonlit plains. "If you know something, tell me." Claire remained silent for nearly a minute. Then she finally said, "The people looking for Rex aren't interested in him because he's a dog." Luke glanced at her. "What does that mean?" "It means Rex was never the objective." Luke felt confusion return. "Then what is?" Claire looked toward the dog. And for the first time, Rex wasn't growling at her. He was watching her, carefully, almost knowingly. The sight unsettled Luke. Claire noticed too. Then she whispered, "Memory." Luke frowned. "What?" "The people searching for him believe Rex remembers something." The statement sounded ridiculous. Dogs remembered things. Sure. Commands, faces, routes, but not enough to justify being hunted across multiple states. Luke shook his head. "That's insane." "I know." "Then explain it." Claire stared through the windshield. "The problem is," she hesitated, "I don't fully understand it myself." Luke laughed bitterly. "Fantastic!" But Claire wasn't joking. "Emily understood more than I did." The mention of his wife hit him again. Still fresh, still painful, even after all these years. "What exactly did Emily know?" Claire closed her eyes briefly. "When we worked together, we occasionally partnered with organizations handling rescue animals." Luke listened. "Most were legitimate." The way she emphasized the word most made him uneasy. "Most?" Claire nodded. "Not all." Outside, the Wyoming landscape rolled past in darkness. Miles of fencing, distant hills, lonely lights scattered across ranch land. Claire continued. "About a year before you met Emily, she became involved in an investigation." Luke looked over. "What kind?" "A private research network." Luke immediately thought of North Star. Claire saw it in his expression. North Star was only one name. That answer made things worse. "What does that mean?" "It means there were others." Luke felt his stomach tighten. "The facilities moved constantly." Her voice lowered. "New names, new companies, new ownership structures, same people." Luke stared ahead. The highway suddenly felt colder. "What were they doing?" Claire took a long time answering. When she finally spoke, her words were careful, measured. "They were studying animal cognition." Luke frowned. "That's legal. Not the way they were doing it." Silence filled the cab. Then Claire added, "They wanted animals capable of retaining information in ways nobody expected." Luke glanced toward her. "What kind of information?" Claire swallowed. "Patterns, locations, faces." Luke thought about Rex, thought about the way he'd reacted to the silver pickup, the black SUV, certain people, certain places, as if pieces were connecting inside his head. And he hated it, because it almost sounded plausible. Almost. Then his phone rang. Both of them jumped. Unknown number. Again. Luke answered. "Hello?" Static. The same static as before. Then a voice. Faint. Distorted. Male. Only 4 words. "Check your mirrors." The line disconnected. Luke's heart immediately accelerated. He looked into the side mirror. Nothing. Then he checked the driver's mirror. Still nothing. But Claire suddenly turned around. "Oh, God!" Luke looked. Headlights. Far behind them, 2 vehicles. Moving fast. Very fast. Closing the distance. Luke pressed harder on the accelerator. The 18-wheeler responded slowly. Heavy freight didn't move like a sports car. The headlights grew larger. Closer. 1 vehicle, then 2, then 3. Luke felt adrenaline flooding through him. "This can't be happening." Claire looked terrified. "They found us." The words barely left her mouth before Rex exploded into barking. The dog rushed toward the rear sleeper compartment, then began scratching wildly at a storage cabinet. Luke glanced back. "What is he doing?" Rex barked harder. Scratched harder, almost frantic. Luke had never seen him behave that way. The pursuing vehicles continued gaining. 1 mile behind, then half a mile, then less. Luke reached back with one hand and opened the cabinet. Immediately, something fell out. A small metal box. Luke frowned. He'd never seen it before. What the hell? Claire stared. Then her face went white. No. Luke grabbed the box. Locked. Old. Dust covered. What is this? Claire looked genuinely shocked. I don't know. You don't know? No. Rex barked again. Harder. The vehicles behind continued approaching. Luke glanced into the mirror. One black SUV. One silver pickup. The same vehicles. The realization hit him instantly. They weren't following him. They were following the box. Claire seemed to reach the same conclusion. Oh my God! Luke gripped the steering wheel. What? Her eyes were locked on the container. Emily hid something. The words landed like a bomb. Luke looked at the box, then back at the road. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. No exits nearby. No towns. No help. Just darkness. And whatever was hidden inside a metal box he'd unknowingly carried for 8 years. The SUV moved closer. Almost alongside now, Luke could see silhouettes through the windshield. Not police, not random travelers. Purposeful, focused. The pickup accelerated on the opposite side, boxing him in. Claire looked terrified. What do they want? Luke answered immediately. The box. But even as he said it, he realized something else. If they wanted the box, why hadn't they simply stolen it years ago? Why wait 8 years? Why spend months tracking him? Why risk exposing themselves now? The answer arrived seconds later, and it came from Rex. The dog suddenly stopped barking, stopped moving, stopped everything. He stared at the metal box, then gently placed one paw on top of it, as if indicating something. Luke looked closer. There was a label attached to the underside. Small, nearly invisible. He pulled it free. A handwritten note. Old, very old. Emily's handwriting, again. Luke felt his chest tighten. The note contained only one sentence. If you're reading this. Rex finally remembered where. Luke nearly drove off the road. Claire gasped. The SUV surged forward. The pickup closed in. Everything happened at once. Luke's hands tightened around the wheel. Rex stared at the note. Claire stared at the note. And Luke realized something impossible. For 8 years, he'd believed he rescued Rex. But now another possibility was emerging. One far stranger. One far more unsettling. Maybe Rex hadn't wandered into Luke's life by accident. Maybe he had been sent. And if Emily's note was telling the truth, and somewhere inside the dog's memory was the location of something people were willing to chase, across multiple states to find. The question was no longer who was following them. The question was what Rex knew, and whether they could uncover it before the people behind them did. Because the black SUV suddenly accelerated, pulled even with the truck, and the passenger rolled down his window. For a split second, Luke saw the man's face illuminated by highway lights. The man's expression changed instantly. Shock. Pure shock. He wasn't looking at Luke. He wasn't looking at Claire. He was staring directly at Rex. Then the man mouthed 2 words. 2 words that made no sense at all. Still alive. A second later, the SUV slammed into the side of the truck. The impact sounded like an explosion. Metal screamed. The entire truck lurched sideways. Luke fought the steering wheel with both hands. 30 tons of freight suddenly shifted beneath him. The trailer began drifting toward the shoulder. For one terrifying second, Luke thought they were going over. Rex was thrown against the passenger seat. Claire slammed into the dashboard. The black SUV fell back, then surged forward again. "They're trying to force us off the road," Claire shouted. Luke didn't answer. Every ounce of concentration was focused on keeping the truck upright. The highway shoulder dropped into a steep drainage ditch. One wrong movement and everything would be over. The SUV moved alongside them again. The silver pickup remained behind, trapping them, controlling them, hurting them, like predators cornering prey. Luke's heart pounded. But something about the situation felt wrong. If these people wanted the box, if they wanted Rex, why risk destroying both? A crash at highway speed could kill everyone. The SUV suddenly swerved closer. Its headlights flashed, not randomly, repeatedly. 3 short flashes. Pause. 3 more. Then 3 again. Luke frowned. The pattern seemed deliberate. The passenger inside the SUV was doing something, trying to communicate. Then Rex started barking. Not at the SUV. at Luke. The dog jumped between the seats, barked, then looked toward the flashing lights, then barked again, almost as if he wanted Luke to notice. The realization hit him instantly. The flashes weren't a threat. They were a message. Luke looked harder. 3 flashes. Pause. 3 flashes. Pause. 3 flashes. SOS. Claire saw it too. Her eyes widened. Oh my God! The SUV abruptly dropped back. The pickup accelerated forward. Now the pickup was the one forcing them toward the shoulder. Luke felt confusion twisting into something worse. Nothing made sense anymore. Who was chasing them? Who was helping them? Which vehicle was the threat? Then everything became much clearer. The pickup driver leaned out his window and raised a handgun. Claire screamed. Luke swerved instinctively. The gun disappeared. But now there was no doubt. The pickup wasn't trying to stop them. It was trying to eliminate them. The black SUV suddenly accelerated. It rammed the pickup from behind. Once. Hard. The pickup fishtailed violently. The gun vanished. The driver fought for control. The SUV hit it again. A second impact. Louder. More violent. The pickup spun across 2 lanes, then disappeared into darkness behind them. Luke stared in disbelief. The SUV remained beside the truck, matching speed, protecting them. Everything had flipped. Everything. Claire looked equally stunned. The SUV? I know. They're helping us. Luke gripped the wheel tighter. The black SUV moved ahead. Its brake lights flashed repeatedly. Exit. The message seemed obvious. The next highway exit appeared a mile ahead. A lonely off-ramp leading into darkness. No town. No visible buildings. Just a road. Luke hated it. Every instinct told him not to follow strangers. Down an empty road in the middle of Wyoming. But the alternative was remaining on the interstate with armed people hunting them. The decision made itself. Luke followed the SUV. The truck thundered down the exit ramp. The black SUV led the way. The road twisted through rolling hills. No traffic, no lights, no civilization. Just darkness and uncertainty. 5 miles later, the SUV turned into an abandoned roadside service station. The place looked forgotten. Boarded windows, collapsed fencing, weeds pushing through cracked pavement. Luke parked. The SUV stopped nearby. Immediately, 3 people emerged. None appeared armed. None looked threatening. But they definitely weren't ordinary travelers. 2 men, 1 woman, all middle-aged. All watching Rex. Not Luke, not Claire. Rex. The woman stepped forward first. Gray hair, weathered face, calm eyes. The moment Claire saw her, she froze. No. The woman nodded sadly. Hello, Claire. Claire looked like she'd seen a ghost. Luke noticed immediately. You know her? Claire's voice barely worked. I thought you were dead. The woman sighed. A lot of people did. Luke stepped between them. Somebody better start talking. The woman looked directly at him. You're Luke Mercer. Luke was getting tired of strangers knowing his name. Who are you? My name is Dr. Hannah Cross. The name meant nothing to him, but it clearly meant something to Claire, because Claire's face had gone completely pale. Dr. Cross glanced toward Rex. The dog stared back. Neither moved. Then something extraordinary happened. Rex slowly walked forward. No growling, no barking, no fear. The dog approached Dr. Cross and sat down in front of her, as if recognizing her. Luke felt a chill. The woman knelt carefully. Her eyes glistened. Hello, buddy. Rex gently touched her hand with his nose. The reaction was immediate. Dr. Cross started crying. Not dramatic crying. Not theatrical. The kind of tears that come from carrying grief for years. Luke looked between them. What is going on? Nobody answered. Finally, Dr. Cross stood, then looked at Luke. Everything you've been told is only part of the story. Luke laughed bitterly. That's becoming a theme. Dr. Cross nodded. The people chasing you work for a private security contractor. Who hired them? A pause. Then, people who want something buried forever. Luke folded his arms. What? Dr. Cross looked toward the metal box. The evidence. The word hung in the air. Evidence. Not money. Not secrets. Evidence. Luke's stomach tightened. Evidence of what? Dr. Cross hesitated, then spoke quietly. Animal trafficking. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The wind pushed through the abandoned station. Somewhere nearby, loose metal rattled. Luke stared. Animal trafficking wasn't what he'd expected. Not even close, Dr. Cross continued. Years ago, several companies claimed they were conducting behavioral research. Claire looked down, clearly already knowing this part. They weren't. Luke listened. They were purchasing animals through fraudulent rescue networks. The words became harder with every sentence. Animals disappeared, records vanished, facilities moved, and when questions started being asked, her voice hardened. People were paid to stay silent. Luke looked at the box. The evidence is in there? Dr. Cross nodded. We think so. We think? Emily's note suddenly felt heavier in his pocket. Dr. Cross noticed. You found her message. Luke slowly nodded. The woman closed her eyes. For a moment, genuine sadness crossed her face. Emily was brave, Claire swallowed. She never told him. Dr. Cross looked at Luke. No, she didn't. Luke felt anger rising. Not at Emily. Never at Emily. At the situation. At the years of secrets. At the realization that the woman he loved carried a burden he never knew existed. Why? Dr. Cross answered softly. To protect you. The response sounded familiar. Almost every secret in history was justified that way. To protect someone. Yet standing there now, Luke wished she'd told him anything, everything, something. Dr. Cross pointed toward Rex. He protected you too. Luke frowned. What does that mean? The woman stared at the dog, then smiled sadly. Because the reason nobody found the evidence for 8 years, she paused, it is because nobody knew where it was hidden. Luke looked at the note. If you're reading this, Rex finally remembered where. His pulse quickened. Wait, Dr. Cross nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. You see it now. Luke looked between them, then at Rex, then back at the note. The pieces were finally beginning to align. Not perfectly, but enough. Emily had hidden evidence somewhere. She couldn't risk keeping the location written down. Couldn't risk telling people. Couldn't risk electronic records. So she'd done something else. Something unbelievable. Something nobody would think to search. She'd created a living map. The realization hit like lightning. Luke looked at Rex. The dog looked back. Suddenly, every strange behavior over the past several days made sense. The growling, the reactions, the rest stops, the staring, the fear, the recognition. Rex hadn't been remembering people. He'd been remembering places, routes, landmarks, directions, a trail buried inside memory. And somehow, after 8 years, something along the Wyoming highways had triggered it. Dr. Cross nodded slowly. He's trying to lead us somewhere. Silence fell. Luke stared at Rex. Rex stared back. Then the dog stood, turned toward the darkness beyond the abandoned service station, and began walking. Not running, not wandering. Walking with purpose. Straight toward the open Wyoming wilderness. As if he suddenly knew exactly where he needed to go. And exactly what had been waiting there all along. For a long moment, nobody moved. The Wyoming night stretched endlessly around them. Cold winds swept across the abandoned service station. The only sound was the distant hum of Luke's truck engine, and Rex walking away, calmly, confidently, without hesitation. Luke had spent 7 years with that dog. He knew every habit, every quirk. Every expression. This was different. Rex wasn't exploring, wasn't chasing a scent, wasn't wandering. He was going somewhere. The certainty of it unsettled everyone. Dr. Cross stared after him. Claire looked equally stunned. One of the men from the SUV whispered, he's remembering. Luke didn't like the way that sounded. The dog reached the edge of the property and stopped, then looked back, waiting. Not confused, not lost. Waiting. Luke followed first. The others came behind him. Within minutes, they left the pavement entirely, moving into open land. Tall grass swayed beneath moonlight. Low hills rolled into darkness. The landscape felt ancient, empty, untouched, almost unreal. Rex continued forward, never speeding up, never slowing down, just walking, as if following instructions only he could see. Luke stayed close. Questions filled his mind. Questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. If Emily had hidden evidence, how much danger had she actually been in? Had her illness truly been the only tragedy in her life? Or had she spent her final months carrying fears she never shared? The thought hurt more than he expected. Ahead, Rex climbed a small ridge. The dog paused briefly, then descended the other side. Dr. Cross suddenly stopped. Her eyes widened. No. Luke looked at her. What? She stared at the terrain, recognition spreading across her face. I know this place. Everyone turned. Claire frowned. What? Dr. Cross looked sick. This used to be private property. Luke glanced around. There was nothing. No buildings. No fences. No roads. Just wilderness, Dr. Cross continued. Years ago, there was a facility here. The words immediately grabbed everyone's attention. A facility? She nodded. Very small. What kind? Dr. Cross hesitated, then answered. A holding site. Nobody liked that answer. Luke least of all. Rex continued onward. The group followed. The further they walked, the stranger things became. Pieces of rusted metal appeared in the grass. Broken concrete. Fragments of old fencing. Evidence that something once existed there. Something deliberately erased. Dr. Cross looked increasingly disturbed. Claire noticed. You've been here before. It wasn't a question. Dr. Cross nodded. Once. Silence. Then she added, I reported it. Luke looked over. What happened? A bitter laugh escaped her. Nothing. The answer told him everything. Somebody powerful had protected whatever happened here. The group crested another ridge. Then Rex stopped. Completely. The dog stood motionless, looking down into a shallow valley. Luke followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing. Then moonlight revealed it. A structure. Tiny. Almost invisible. Hidden among brush and trees. Not a building, not exactly. More like a storm shelter. Half buried underground. Luke felt a chill. Nobody spoke. The silence itself felt heavy. Rex started walking again, straight toward it. Every step seemed deliberate. The closer they got, the more details emerged. Steel door, concrete walls, weathered hinges, old but intact. Luke immediately understood why nobody had found it. You could stand 100 yards away and never notice it existed. Dr. Cross stopped moving. Oh, God. Luke looked at her. What? She swallowed hard. I remember this. Nobody liked her tone. The woman stared at the buried structure, then quietly said, this wasn't part of the official property records. Luke's stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means somebody built it secretly. Nobody needed further explanation. The implication was obvious. Whatever was hidden here was never meant to be discovered. Rex reached the door, then sat down. Simply sat. Mission accomplished. Luke stared. The dog looked exhausted. Not physically, almost emotionally. As if he'd been carrying something for years and had finally put it down. The sight unexpectedly broke Luke's heart, because suddenly he remembered the puppy beneath the fuel tanker. The frightened animal he'd rescued. The years they'd spent together. The countless miles. The countless mornings. The countless lonely nights. And now he realized something profound. Maybe Rex hadn't just been rescued by Luke. Maybe Luke had been rescued by Rex. The thought lingered. Then reality returned. The steel door. The hidden structure. The mystery. Dr. Cross approached carefully. The lock was old. Corroded. Almost consumed by rust. One of the SUV men produced a pry bar. Several minutes later, the lock finally snapped. Nobody moved immediately. Nobody wanted to. Luke could feel tension spreading through the group, because whatever waited inside would finally answer years of questions. Or create new ones. The door groaned open. Darkness. Dust. Cold air. Luke switched on a flashlight, then stepped inside. The shelter wasn't large. One room. Concrete walls. Metal shelving, no furniture, no signs of recent activity, just silence. For a moment, it appeared empty. Then Luke's flashlight found something, a stack of waterproof storage containers. 3 of them lined against the far wall. Claire exhaled sharply. Dr. Cross closed her eyes. Nobody spoke. Luke approached slowly. The first container opened with surprising ease. Inside were documents, thousands of pages, folders, records, photographs. Shipping manifests, financial ledgers, names, dates, locations. The sheer volume was overwhelming. Dr. Cross looked stunned. It's all here. Luke opened another container. Hard drives, memory cards, video archives, backups, duplicates, evidence, years of evidence. Enough to destroy careers, companies, entire organizations. Claire stared. Emily had hidden everything, not some of it, all of it, for years. The realization filled Luke with both pride and sadness. Even now she was protecting people, still fighting, still refusing to let the truth disappear. Then they opened the third container, and everything changed. Because it wasn't filled with evidence. It contained a single binder. Nothing else. Just one binder. Luke opened it, immediately recognizing the handwriting. Emily. Page after page. Emily. The room fell silent. Dr. Cross stepped closer. Claire covered her mouth. Luke turned the pages carefully. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't research. It wasn't documentation. It was a journal, written during the final year of Emily's life. His hands trembled. He started reading. The entries began normally. Descriptions of the investigation, meetings, discoveries, concerns. Then they became personal. Fear, stress, uncertainty. Eventually illness appeared. The diagnosis, the treatments, the exhaustion. Luke felt his throat tightening. He kept reading. Then he found an entry dated 3 weeks before her death. Everything stopped. The page contained a message. Not to investigators, not to authorities, to him. Luke, if you're reading this, then Rex did exactly what I hoped he would. I know you'll be angry that I kept this from you. You deserve that. But I couldn't risk losing you too. The people involved in this were dangerous. And by the time I realized how dangerous, I was already running out of time. So I made a choice. I trusted the one soul who never broke a promise. Luke looked toward Rex. The dog lay quietly beside the doorway, watching. Emily's words continued. You always thought you rescued him. The truth is a little different. We rescued each other. The day I met Rex, he was terrified. The day you met Rex, so were you. You just hid it better. Luke felt tears forming. Around him, nobody spoke. Nobody interrupted. He continued reading. I knew if I hid the evidence with people, eventually someone would betray it. But a dog doesn't betray. A dog remembers. Maybe not the way we do, but enough. Enough to bring you back when the time was right. Enough to finish what I couldn't. Enough to make sure the truth survived. Luke stopped reading. The words blurred. For several seconds he couldn't continue. Then he reached the final page. The last entry. The final thing Emily ever wrote. And it contained a revelation none of them expected. A revelation that explained everything. Why Rex reacted to certain people. Why the SUV had found them. Why someone wanted the evidence destroyed. And why, after 8 years, the search had suddenly begun again. Luke stared at the final paragraph, his heart pounding. Then he slowly looked up, toward Dr. Cross, toward Claire, toward everyone. Because one sentence changed the entire story. One sentence, written in Emily's handwriting. The people who helped expose this operation were never the real threat. The real threat was the person who secretly funded it. And he was still free. Nobody spoke. The silence inside the shelter felt suffocating. Luke stared at the final page. Read it again, then a third time. The words never changed. The real threat was the person who secretly funded it. And he was still free. Claire slowly sat down on an old storage crate. Dr. Cross looked as though all the color had drained from her face. One of the men from the SUV finally broke the silence. Did she name him? Luke lowered his eyes to the journal. His pulse quickened, because Emily hadn't stopped there. The sentence continued. Further down the page, beneath a section she'd crossed out and rewritten several times. As if she had struggled to decide whether to include it. Luke swallowed, then read aloud. If this journal is ever found, the name should already be familiar to the people searching for it. Nobody moved. Luke continued. His public image is everything. That's why he spent so much money protecting the truth. Claire whispered. Oh no. Luke turned another page. There was only one sheet left. A folded page tucked inside the back cover. Emily's final note. He unfolded it carefully. Inside was a single name. And every person in the room reacted instantly. Not confusion. Recognition. Pure recognition. Luke looked from face to face. What? Nobody answered immediately. Dr. Cross finally spoke. Are you sure? Luke looked back down. The name was written clearly. There was no doubt, no ambiguity. No possibility of misunderstanding. Luke read it aloud. Daniel Voss. The reaction was immediate. Claire closed her eyes. One of the SUV men muttered a curse. Dr. Cross stared at the floor. Luke frowned. Who is Daniel Voss? Nobody answered for several seconds. Then Dr. Cross finally looked up. And what she said next nearly made Luke drop the journal. He's the reason we thought we'd never win. Luke stared. The name meant absolutely nothing to him. But it clearly meant everything to them. Dr. Cross took a slow breath. Daniel Voss owns Voss Logistics. Luke blinked. Then realization struck. Not complete realization, but enough. Because Luke knew that name. Every truck driver in the western United States knew that name. Massive freight operations, distribution centers, warehouses, transportation contracts. The company was everywhere. thousands of employees, hundreds of routes. A transportation empire. Luke looked stunned. You're telling me one of the largest logistics companies in America funded animal trafficking? Dr. Cross shook her head. No. Luke frowned. Then what are you saying? That Daniel Voss did? The distinction mattered. The company wasn't the problem. The man behind it was. Claire leaned forward. For years, nobody could prove the connection. Luke listened. The shell companies vanished. The records disappeared. The witnesses changed their stories. The facilities closed. Everything always led nowhere. Dr. Cross nodded. Because someone with enormous resources kept cleaning up the evidence. Luke looked around the room, then at the containers, then at Emily's journal. Not anymore. The evidence was here. All of it. Enough to expose everything. Enough to destroy someone. Enough to explain why armed people were hunting them. Then a thought struck him. A bad one. A very bad one. Wait, everyone looked at him. Luke's stomach tightened. If Daniel Voss is behind this? He looked toward the open doorway. Yeah, then how did his people find us tonight? Nobody answered, because everyone suddenly understood the question. The evidence had been hidden for 8 years. Nobody should have known they were close. Nobody should have known where to look. Yet somehow, armed contractors appeared the exact moment Rex led them here. The realization spread through the room. Cold. Uncomfortable. Someone knew, someone had told them, or someone had been watching them. The silence grew heavier. Then Rex stood up. The movement immediately caught Luke's attention. The dog wasn't barking, wasn't growling, just listening. Carefully, his ears tilted toward the darkness outside. Luke felt a chill. Rex? The dog slowly walked toward the doorway. Every person in the room became still. Rex stepped outside, then stopped. A low growl emerged from deep inside his chest. Luke's heart immediately accelerated. Not again. The growl intensified. Dr. Cross looked toward the entrance. What is it? Nobody answered. Then they heard it. An engine. Far away, but approaching. Luke moved outside. The others followed. The Wyoming night stretched endlessly around them. Moonlight illuminated the hills. At first he saw nothing. Then distant headlights appeared. One pair, then another, coming from multiple directions. Luke felt his stomach drop. Vehicles, several of them, approaching fast. The hidden shelter had been found. Dr. Cross whispered, "How?" No one answered, because everyone was thinking the same thing. Someone had betrayed them. The headlights multiplied. 4 vehicles. 5, 6. Closing in from different directions. Coordinated. Deliberate. Professional. Luke turned toward the SUV team. What now? The gray-haired woman who'd been driving the black SUV looked toward the approaching lights. Then at the evidence. Then at Luke. We leave. Simple. Direct. Necessary. The containers were quickly loaded. The journal remained with Luke. Within minutes, everyone was moving. The black SUV, Luke's truck, another support vehicle. Rex jumped into the cab beside him, still watching the approaching lights. The convoy pulled away just as the first pursuing vehicles reached the valley. Luke saw headlights sweep across the shelter behind them. They'd missed them by minutes, maybe less. The chase resumed, but this time something had changed. Now Luke understood why. The people pursuing them weren't trying to recover evidence anymore. They were trying to destroy it, and perhaps anyone carrying it. The realization settled heavily in his chest. Hours passed. The convoy traveled north across isolated Wyoming roads. No interstate, no major highways. Only forgotten routes cutting through ranch land and open wilderness. Eventually, dawn began appearing on the horizon. The sky shifted from black to deep blue, then gray, then pale gold. Luke felt exhausted, emotionally drained, physically exhausted. Yet sleep was impossible. Too much had happened. Too many questions remained. Then something unexpected occurred. Rex rested his head on Luke's leg. A simple gesture. One he'd done thousands of times before. But somehow it felt different now. Luke glanced down. The dog looked tired. Older. Not physically, just tired. Like someone who had finally completed a very long journey. Luke reached over and scratched behind his ears. Rex's tail thumped once, softly. Luke smiled despite everything. Then he remembered something from Emily's journal. A line he hadn't fully processed. We rescued each other. The words returned unexpectedly, and suddenly he understood. Not the mystery, not the conspiracy, not the investigation. Something more important. For 8 years, Luke believed he'd saved an abandoned dog, but the truth was far deeper. After Emily died, Luke had become hollow, existing rather than living, driving rather than healing, surviving rather than moving forward. And through all of it, Rex had remained. Every mile, every sunrise, every lonely truck stop, every silent night, the dog had carried him through grief without ever saying a word. A lump formed in Luke's throat because Emily had known. Somehow she'd known that when she was gone, Luke would need someone. And she'd trusted Rex to stay. The thought nearly broke him. Hours later, the convoy reached a small, private airfield near the Wyoming-Montana border. Not abandoned, but quiet, remote, secure. Several people were already waiting. Federal investigators. Real ones. The kind with credentials. Documentation. Authority. Dr. Cross finally relaxed for the first time all night. It's over. Luke wasn't convinced, but as the evidence changed hands, the atmosphere shifted. The containers, the drives, the records, the journal, everything. Years of secrets now belonged to people who could act on them. People who could no longer pretend they didn't exist. One investigator spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing material, then looked at Dr. Cross. Why wasn't this submitted years ago? Nobody answered, because everyone knew. Fear, power, money, influence. The same reasons truth disappears every day. By noon, helicopters had arrived, additional investigators. Additional teams. The process had begun, finally. After years, Luke sat outside the hangar with Rex beside him. The dog slept peacefully, for the first time in days. Maybe for the first time in years. Claire approached quietly. She sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. Then she smiled faintly. Emily would be proud. Luke stared toward the distant mountains. The words hurt, but in a different way now. Not the sharp pain of loss. Something softer. Something warmer. I wish she could have told me. Claire nodded. I know. Luke looked down at Rex. He carried all of this. Claire followed his gaze. Yeah. A small laugh escaped her. Who would have believed it? Luke smiled. Then his phone buzzed. Everyone nearby immediately became alert. Unknown number. Again. The same thing they'd seen before. Luke stared at the screen. The call continued ringing. Claire looked nervous. So what do you think? Luke answered. Then placed the phone on speaker. Silence. Static. Just like before. Then a voice. A man's voice. Calm. Controlled. Dangerously calm. Only one sentence. You should have left it buried. The line disconnected. Luke slowly lowered the phone. Around him, several investigators exchanged looks. Nobody needed an explanation. The mystery wasn't over. Not completely. Because somewhere out there, Daniel Voss had just realized the evidence survived. And somewhere out there, he knew exactly who had delivered it. Luke looked at Rex. The dog lifted his head, then unexpectedly stood. Not alarmed, not afraid. Just attentive, watching the runway. A moment later, a black government SUV pulled onto the tarmac. The lead investigator stepped out, his expression serious, very serious. He walked directly toward Luke. No hesitation, no small talk. When he finally spoke, every remaining sense of peace vanished. Because the investigator wasn't looking at the evidence. He wasn't looking at the journal. He wasn't even looking at Claire. He was looking directly at Rex. And the first words out of his mouth were, "We need to talk about what your dog saw 8 years ago." Luke stared at the investigator. For a second, he thought he'd misheard him. "What my dog saw!" The investigator nodded. His name tag identified him as Special Agent Nathan Hale. Late 50s. Weathered face. The kind of man who looked like he'd spent decades carrying difficult truths. Behind him, federal agents continued unloading evidence. Helicopter blades echoed across the airfield. Yet suddenly none of that mattered. Luke only heard one thing. "What your dog saw." Agent Hale glanced toward Rex. The dog was watching him carefully, not growling, not barking, just studying him Interestingly, Hale didn't seem surprised, almost as if he'd expected that reaction. Claire noticed too. "You know, Rex, it wasn't a question." Hale sighed. "A little." Luke stood up. "A little?" The investigator rubbed the back of his neck, then looked toward the distant mountains. "I hoped I'd never see that dog again." The statement landed heavily. Luke felt another layer of the mystery unfolding. Another secret. Another piece nobody had mentioned. Dr. Cross approached. Her expression had hardened. "You were involved." Hale nodded slowly. "Yes." The woman closed her eyes. For several seconds, she looked genuinely angry. "You told us the files were destroyed." "I believed they were." The answer came immediately. Without hesitation, Luke could tell he was telling the truth, or at least believed he was. Hale looked at Rex again, then quietly said, "But nobody told me about him." Silence followed. The investigator motioned toward an empty hangar office nearby. "We should talk inside." 10 minutes later, they sat around a metal conference table. Luke, Claire, Dr. Cross, Agent Hale, and Rex lying beside Luke's chair. The investigator placed a thick folder on the table. Old, worn, clearly archived for years. He opened it carefully. The first photograph appeared. Luke frowned. The image showed a facility. Small, remote, surrounded by fencing. The hidden Wyoming site, except it wasn't abandoned. It was active. Vehicles, employees, equipment, everything. Hale slid another photograph forward, then another, then another. The pictures revealed what the site had looked like years ago. Luke studied them. Something felt wrong, very wrong. The facility wasn't large enough for major research, not large enough for trafficking operations. Not large enough for the scale of conspiracy they'd uncovered. Hale saw the confusion. "You're noticing the same thing I did." Luke looked up. "This place is too small." "Exactly." The investigator leaned back. "The Wyoming facility wasn't the operation." Luke frowned. "Then what was it?" Hale hesitated, then answered. "It was storage." Nobody spoke. The room suddenly felt colder. "Storage for what?" Luke asked. The investigator looked toward Rex, then back at Luke. "Witnesses." The word hit everyone differently. Luke didn't understand. Claire looked disturbed. Dr. Cross looked like she already suspected. Hale continued. "Animals." The room fell silent. "Animals that had seen things." Luke blinked. That sounded absurd, yet nobody laughed. Nobody dismissed it, because too much of this story had already proven impossible things possible. Hale opened the folder further. More photographs emerged. Dogs, horses, primates, rescue animals, shelter animals, transport animals. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The investigator spoke quietly. "The original research wasn't about intelligence." Luke listened carefully. "It was about memory." A chill moved through the room. "Certain animals possess extraordinary spatial recall." Hale pointed toward Rex, "especially dogs." Luke looked down at his companion. The Australian Shepherd mix lifted his head slightly, almost as if he recognized the conversation. Hale continued. "The people funding the operation discovered something unexpected." "What?" The investigator exhaled slowly. "Animals remember far more than most people realize." Nobody interrupted. The room was completely silent. "They remember routes, locations, people, voices, patterns, places they've only visited once." Luke remembered Rex leading them across miles of wilderness, straight to the hidden shelter, not wandering, not searching, remembering. Hale continued. "When the operation started collapsing, certain records disappeared." Luke nodded. "The evidence." "Not just evidence." Hale's expression darkened. "Witnesses." Again that word. Luke frowned. "Animals aren't witnesses." The investigator met his eyes. "Tell that to the people trying to kill your dog." Nobody spoke, because the point was obvious. Whether Rex could testify didn't matter. What mattered was that someone believed he remembered something dangerous, something valuable, something capable of exposing them. Claire leaned forward. "So what did Rex see?" Hale remained silent. A long silence, the kind that made everyone uncomfortable. Finally he answered. "We don't know." Luke stared. "What?" "We never knew." The answer shocked everyone. Hale spread several photographs across the table. One image immediately caught Luke's attention. A younger Rex, still a puppy, standing beside transport crates. The date printed on the back made Luke's heart jump. 3 weeks before he found him. 3 weeks. That was all. Only 3 weeks separated the photograph from the terrified puppy hiding beneath the tanker yard. Hale pointed toward the image. "He vanished during a transfer." Luke nodded. "I read that." "Officially." The investigator emphasized the word. Then he produced another photograph. This one had never appeared in any article. Luke stared. The image showed wreckage, A destroyed transport vehicle, scattered crates, broken fencing, chaos. What happened? Hale's jaw tightened. The transport never reached its destination. Nobody moved. Why? The investigator looked down at the picture, then back at Luke. Because someone inside the operation tried to expose it. Silence. The realization spread quickly. An insider. A whistleblower. Someone who'd risked everything. Hale continued. The convoy was intercepted. Luke felt his pulse quicken. By who? We never proved it. The answer frustrated everyone. But Hale wasn't finished. The driver disappeared. The records vanished. The animals scattered. Luke looked down at Rex. The pieces were forming. Slowly. Painfully. But they were forming. Hale nodded toward the dog. When we found the wreckage, most animals were gone. Luke already knew what came next. Rex escaped. Yes, the investigator paused, then added, with someone. Luke froze. What? Hale opened another file. Inside was a blurry surveillance image. Poor quality. Rain. Darkness. Yet one detail remained clear. A dog. A young Australian Shepherd mix. Rex. Walking beside a woman. Luke's breath caught. Because even through the blurry image, he recognized her. Emily. Nobody spoke. The photograph seemed to absorb all sound. Luke stared at it, unable to look away. Emily. Years before he met her. Walking beside Rex. Leading him away from the crash site. The evidence was undeniable. Hale nodded slowly. That's how she found him. Luke felt emotion building in his chest. Emily had known Rex before Luke ever did. Before their marriage. Before their life together. Before everything. The dog had been part of this story from the beginning. Claire covered her mouth. Dr. Cross looked stunned. Even she apparently hadn't known. Hale continued quietly. Emily became convinced Rex had witnessed something important. Luke stared at the photograph. What? The investigator shook his head. She never knew. Another silence. Then Hale added, but somebody else thought he did. The room became still. Completely still. Because everyone understood the implication. The people hunting Rex for 8 years hadn't been searching for evidence. The evidence was hidden, protected, lost. What they feared was the dog. The possibility that somewhere inside his memory remained. A detail they couldn't identify. A location. A face. A meeting. Something. Anything. Enough to expose the final pieces of the truth. Luke looked at Rex. The dog slowly stood, walked around the table, then stopped beside the old photographs. His nose touched one image. Just one. A photograph nobody had paid attention to. A routine facility picture. Nothing remarkable, at least at first glance. And Hale leaned forward. His expression changed instantly. Oh my God! Luke looked closer. The photograph showed employees unloading transport crates. Normal, ordinary, forgettable, except for one thing, a reflection, visible in a warehouse window, tiny, barely noticeable, a man's face. The image quality was poor, but recognizable, very recognizable, because every person in the room knew exactly who it was. Daniel Voss, standing at the facility, present, on site, directly connected, not through shell companies, not through paperwork. Not through intermediaries. Personally present. The room fell silent. Agent Hale stared at the photograph, then at Rex, then back at the photograph. And for the first time since arriving at the airfield, the veteran investigator looked genuinely stunned. Because after 8 years, after all the lies, after all the dead ends, after all the people who vanished, the final missing connection hadn't been found by investigators, or journalists, or prosecutors. It had been found by a lonely truck driver's dog. Nobody spoke for nearly 30 seconds. The photograph sat in the center of the table. Small, ordinary, yet suddenly more important than every box of evidence sitting in the hangar outside. Daniel Voss, not a rumor, not a financial connection, not a hidden ownership trail. Him, physically present. At a facility he had spent years claiming he knew nothing about. Agent Hale carefully picked up the photograph. His hands were actually shaking. Luke noticed immediately. "You okay?" The investigator laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "Do you have any idea how many years people have looked for something like this?" Luke remained silent. Hale stared at the image. "We had witnesses. We had records. We had suspicious transactions. But every time we got close," he shook his head. "His lawyers tore everything apart." The investigator looked down at Rex. "But this," he held up the photograph, "changes everything." Dr. Cross slowly sat back in her chair. For the first time since Luke met her, she looked hopeful. Actually hopeful. Claire looked stunned, as though she couldn't quite believe the nightmare was finally ending. Luke wanted to feel the same, but something still bothered him, something important. He looked toward Rex. The dog remained focused on the photograph, not relaxed, not satisfied. Focused. Luke knew that look, and suddenly a thought occurred to him, a bad one. A very bad one. What if that's not what he was trying to show us? The room went quiet again. Agent Hale frowned. "What?" Luke pointed toward Rex. "Look at him." Everyone did. The dog wasn't looking at Daniel Voss's reflection anymore. His attention remained fixed on another part of the photograph, a corner nobody had examined, a detail everyone had ignored. Hale slowly lowered the picture, then leaned closer. Luke moved beside him. Dr. Cross joined them. Claire, too. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Hale whispered, "There's another person." Luke squinted. A second reflection, much fainter, much harder to see, partially obscured, standing beside Daniel Voss. At first it appeared meaningless, just another employee. Another shadow, another figure. Then Hale's expression changed. The investigator looked genuinely alarmed. "What?" Luke asked. Hale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up, walked to his briefcase, removed a tablet, typed rapidly. Several files appeared. Photographs, personnel records, archive documents. Then Hale returned to the table. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" Claire asked. The investigator turned the tablet around. Everyone looked. The image displayed an older photograph. A corporate event. Several executives standing together. Luke recognized Daniel Voss instantly, but it wasn't Voss Hale pointed to. It was the man beside him. The second reflection, the second face. Luke frowned. "I don't know him." Hale's expression darkened. "I do." Silence. Then the investigator quietly said, "That's Richard Kane." The name meant nothing to Luke, but it clearly meant something to everyone else. Dr. Cross swore under her breath. Claire looked shocked. "What?" Luke demanded. Hale exhaled slowly. "Richard Kane died 6 years ago." The room froze. Luke blinked. "What?" "Died in a private plane crash. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke." The investigator continued. "It was national news." Luke still didn't understand. "So?" Hale looked at him. "Richard Kane wasn't Daniel Voss's employee." Another pause. Then, "He was the lead federal investigator assigned to the case." The words landed like a bomb. Luke stared. Claire stared. Dr. Cross stared. The room suddenly felt much smaller, much colder. Richard Kane, federal investigator, officially dead, standing beside Daniel Voss inside a secret facility. Years before the crash. Years before anyone knew there was a connection. The implication was horrifying. Hale slowly nodded. Either Kane was investigating Voss, he pointed at the reflection, or he was working with him. Nobody liked either possibility, Luke least of all, because suddenly the story had become bigger, much bigger. Animal trafficking, corruption, cover-ups. Those things were terrible. But this suggested infiltration, protection from inside, maybe even betrayal at federal levels. The kind of thing capable of burying investigations for decades. The kind of thing people killed to protect. Luke looked toward the window. Outside, agents moved evidence between vehicles. Nobody seemed aware of the storm brewing inside the office. Then Rex stood. Immediately, abruptly, every person in the room turned. The dog wasn't looking at the photograph anymore. Wasn't looking at Hale or Luke. He was staring through the office window toward the runway. A low growl emerged. Luke's stomach tightened instantly. Not again. Everyone followed Rex's gaze. Outside, a black sedan had entered the airfield. Nothing unusual, except nobody recognized it. The vehicle rolled slowly toward the hangars, then stopped. 3 people exited. Dark suits. Professional. Confident. One carried a briefcase. Another carried identification. Agent Hale immediately frowned. "Who are they?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. The 3 individuals approached the hangar entrance. Several federal agents met them halfway. Conversation followed. Brief. Professional. Then something strange happened. The agents guarding the evidence stepped aside. allowed them through. Hale stood, every instinct in his body suddenly screaming, "That's not right." Luke noticed it too. The investigators outside looked uncertain, confused, almost pressured. The three strangers continued walking, straight toward the evidence containers. Hale was already moving. What are they doing? Nobody knew. The group rushed outside. The wind hit immediately. The strangers had reached the evidence. One opened a folder. Another displayed credentials. The surrounding agents seemed reluctant, nervous. Then Hale shouted, "Stop!" Everyone turned. The strangers turned too. For a brief second, nobody moved. Then the oldest of the three smiled. Not warmly, not politely, just confidently, as if he expected to be obeyed. He held up credentials. "Department Review Authority." Hale didn't slow down. "Since when?" The man smiled again. "Since this morning." Luke didn't understand, but Hale clearly did, and he hated whatever it meant. The investigator reached the containers, looked at the paperwork, then his face darkened, very dark. "They're taking custody." Dr. Cross stepped forward. "What?" Hale looked furious. "Someone just ordered all evidence transferred." The word sent a chill through everyone. "Transferred where?" "Transferred to whom?" The older man answered calmly. "National Review Division." Nobody believed him. Nobody. Luke could see it in every face around him. The timing was impossible. Too convenient. Too perfect. 8 years of hidden evidence surfaces, and within hours, unknown officials arrived to remove it. The older man turned toward Luke, then toward Rex, and for the first time, his calm expression slipped. Only briefly, but Luke caught it. Recognition. The man recognized the dog. Immediately. Agent Hale noticed too. "So that's it." The stranger looked back at him. "Excuse me?" Hale pointed at Rex. "You know exactly who he is." Silence. A long silence, and the man smiled again. The smile somehow felt colder than before. "You'd be surprised what I know." Luke felt his pulse quicken. Every instinct screamed danger. The stranger's eyes remained fixed on Rex. Not curious, not interested, focused, like someone finally seeing a problem he'd searched years to find. Then he said something that made every hair on Luke's neck stand up, something directed entirely at the dog. "You're supposed to be dead." The airfield fell silent. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, because suddenly everyone understood. This wasn't about evidence anymore. This wasn't about containers, or documents, or photographs. The people who buried the truth for 8 years had finally arrived themselves. And they weren't worried about what was in the boxes. They were worried about what Rex still remembered. And judging by the look in the stranger's eyes, they believed there was one final secret the dog hadn't revealed yet. The silence on the airfield didn't last long. It never did. Not when men like that showed up. Agent Hale stepped forward first, voice low but sharp. "Who authorized this transfer?" The older man in the suit didn't even look at him at first. His eyes stayed locked on Rex. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he turned. "Authorization came from above your clearance." Hale laughed once. "That's not an answer." The man finally looked at him fully, and for a moment something colder passed behind his expression. "Then ask yourself why you weren't informed." That hit differently, because Hale clearly had no answer for that. Luke stood just behind him. Rex pressed close to his leg now, unusually still. Not relaxed. Not calm. Alert in a way Luke had never seen before. The kind of stillness that came right before a storm. Claire whispered, "This is bad." Dr. Cross didn't respond. She was staring at the men in suits, like she was trying to place something she couldn't quite remember. The third man, the one holding the briefcase, finally spoke. "We're here to secure all materials related to Voss Logistics' internal matters and associated legacy investigations." Hale snapped. "That case has been active for years under federal review." "Was active," the man corrected. Past tense. That single word changed the air. Luke felt it immediately. Something had just shifted. Not legally. Not procedurally. Power had shifted. Hale realized it too. His jaw tightened. "You don't get to just erase jurisdiction because you showed up with paperwork." The man gave a polite smile. "I'm not erasing anything." He gestured lightly toward the containers. "I'm consolidating it." Luke watched the exchange carefully, but Rex wasn't watching them. The dog's attention had drifted again, this time toward the briefcase, fixated, unblinking. And now Luke noticed something else. A faint sound, almost imperceptible. A soft electronic pulse. coming from inside it. Claire noticed Luke's expression. What is it? Luke lowered his voice. I think there's something in that case. Hale heard him, immediately turned. What do you mean? Luke hesitated. I don't know. But Rex, he didn't finish, because Rex suddenly moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberately. He stepped forward. One step, then another, stopping only when he was directly facing the briefcase. Every conversation stopped instantly. Even the suited men went quiet. The older man frowned. What is that animal doing? Rex didn't respond to him, didn't react at all. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, listening. The electronic pulse grew faintly louder. Beep, pause, beep, pause. Luke felt his stomach drop, because now he recognized it too. It wasn't just a sound, it was a signal, a pattern, a sequence. Rex sat down slowly, then let out a low, controlled growl. Not fear, not aggression. Recognition. Hale stepped closer to Luke. Do you hear that? Luke nodded. The investigator's eyes narrowed. That's not standard issue. The man with the briefcase shifted slightly, just slightly, but Luke saw it. A flicker of discomfort, the first crack in his confidence. Hale pointed. What's inside? The man answered too quickly. Documentation. Hale didn't believe him for a second. Open it. A pause. The air tightened. The man smiled again, but it didn't land this time. That's not necessary. Hale stepped forward. I said open it. Now there was tension. Real tension. The agents nearby shifted uncomfortably. Claire leaned toward Luke. If they're federal, why are they hiding? She stopped mid-sentence. Because Rex had stood again. And this time he wasn't looking at the briefcase. He was looking at the man holding it and the expression on Rex's face. It wasn't confusion. It was memory. Luke felt something twist inside him. What is it, buddy? Rex didn't move, didn't blink. Then, very slowly, he took one step forward and growled. Deep. Controlled. The man with the briefcase took a small step back before he caught himself. And that's when it happened. Rex barked once. Sharp. Clean. Not random. Targeted. The sound echoed across the airfield. And immediately, everything changed. The man's expression tightened. Not fear, not surprise. Recognition. Get that dog back, he snapped. Hale froze. Why? The man's eyes shifted. Just for a fraction of a second. But Luke caught it. Pure panic. Because that animal is not supposed to respond to me. Silence. Absolute silence. Luke felt his heart slam in his chest. What does that mean? Claire whispered. No one answered her. Because Rex had started moving again. But not toward the man, toward the briefcase. And now Luke understood something terrifying. The dog wasn't reacting to the man. He was reacting to what was inside the case. The signal was stronger now. Beep, beep. Pause. Faster. More urgent. Rex's breathing changed. Not panic. Focus. Like something deep inside him had just snapped into place. Hale slowly turned to Luke. Get him back. Luke hesitated, but Rex didn't look away. Not even once. Then, in a moment that froze everyone, Rex spoke, not in words, but in behavior so precise it might as well have been. He pressed his paw to the ground, then looked up at Luke, then toward the briefcase, then back at Luke again. A pattern, a request, a direction. Luke's breath caught. No way, Claire whispered. What is he doing? Dr. Cross stepped forward slowly. Oh my God. Hale looked at her. What? Her voice trembled. He's mapping it. The words didn't land immediately. But then Luke understood. Rex wasn't reacting randomly. He wasn't just remembering places. He was reconstructing something. A sequence. A path. A trigger. A memory structure buried deep enough that it required a signal to unlock. The briefcase wasn't just important. It was the key. The man with the briefcase suddenly stepped back. Secure the dog, and that's when the agents around them moved. Too fast! Too coordinated. Too prepared. Luke grabbed Rex instinctively. No! But Rex didn't resist. Not even slightly. Instead, he barked again, louder this time. And the sound did something strange. It made the agents hesitate, just for a second. But it was enough. Rex pulled forward, dragging Luke slightly, not away, toward the briefcase. Hale shouted, "Wait!" But no one waited, because Rex had already made contact. He pressed his nose against the briefcase and froze. Completely. The electronic signal inside spiked. Beep, beep, beep. Faster. Then suddenly, Rex's entire body stiffened. His eyes widened, and he let out a sound Luke had never heard before. Not a bark, not a growl, something in between, like recognition breaking through a wall. And then Rex collapsed. Silence fell instantly. Luke dropped to his knees. "Rex!" Claire gasped. Dr. Cross rushed forward. Even Hale froze. The man with the briefcase stepped back, now openly alarmed. "What did you do?" But no one was looking at him anymore. Luke held Rex's head in his hands. Hey, stay with me." The dog blinked once, twice, slowly. Then something changed. His breathing steadied, his eyes focused, and he looked directly at Luke. Not scared, not confused, but aware. And then Rex did something that made Luke's blood run cold. He turned his head slightly, toward the runway, toward the horizon, and let out a single quiet whine, like a warning, like a reminder, like something inside him had finally been unlocked, but not fully controlled. And somewhere far beyond the airfield, something responded back. Luke didn't hear the engines at first, because he was still holding Rex, still trying to understand what that whine meant, still watching the dog's eyes, which were no longer looking at him. They were fixed on the horizon, far beyond the airfield. Then Agent Hale turned sharply. "Everyone get down, now!" The words hit like a reflex, but it was already too late. The first sound wasn't an explosion. It was silence breaking. Then headlights appeared on the far edge of the runway. Not one vehicle, not two, a line of them, black SUVs. No markings, no hesitation. Moving fast. "Too fast," Claire whispered. "That's not federal." Dr. Cross shook her head. "No, that's private." Luke's grip tightened on Rex. The dog's body was trembling now. Not fear, memory. Something inside him was waking up fully. The same electronic pulse from the briefcase still echoed faintly in the air. Beep. Pause. Beep. But now it was different, because now something outside was answering it. Hale grabbed his radio. "Lock down the perimeter. Stop all vehicles." But his voice was drowned out. The SUVs didn't slow. They split into formation. Too coordinated, too practiced, like they had done this before, many times. The man in the suit, the one from before, stepped backward slowly. For the first time, his calm mask cracked completely. "This wasn't supposed to escalate," he muttered. Luke heard him. "What did you say?" The man ignored him. Instead, he stared at Rex. And then something worse happened. He looked afraid. Not of the agents, not of Hale, of the dog. "Shut it down," he suddenly said into his sleeve mic. Static answered. Then another voice. Cold. Controlled. Familiar. Too late. Luke froze. That voice. He had heard it before. On the phone. "You should have left it buried." The same man. The unseen one. Now speaking directly through the chaos. Hale snapped. "Who is that?" No answer. Only movement. The SUVs were closer now. Too close. And Rex suddenly pulled free from Luke's grip. "Rex, no!" But the dog didn't run away. He ran forward, straight toward the runway, straight toward the approaching vehicles. Claire screamed, "He's going into them!" But Dr. Cross grabbed her arm. "No, wait, look." Rex wasn't running blindly. He was following something, something invisible. The pulse. Beep! 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 Now coming from everywhere. Not just the briefcase, from the vehicles. From the air itself. Luke realized it all at once. "They're synced." Hale turned sharply. "What?" Luke's voice shook. "The briefcase isn't just a file, it's a trigger." The investigator stared at him, and then understanding hit him too. "Remote activation." Luke nodded. "Memory cue." Rex wasn't reacting to danger. He was reacting to activation. Whatever was inside him had been designed to respond. The SUVs screeched to a halt. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Dark uniforms. Not police, not military, something else entirely. One of them raised a device. Small, industrial, and the beeping changed instantly. Faster. Rex stopped mid-run. His body stiffened. Luke screamed, "Stop it!" But it didn't stop. The man with the device looked directly at Rex, then spoke into a calm. "Subject responsive." Hale's face went pale. "Subject?" Dr. Cross whispered. "Oh my God." Claire backed away slowly. Luke stood frozen, because Rex wasn't just reacting anymore. He was remembering, visibly. His eyes flickered. His body trembled harder. And then a flash. Not light, not sound. Memory. Rex suddenly turned his head sharply, as if seeing something that wasn't there. A transport truck. Rain. Crates. Voices. Emily. Luke felt his breath catch, because he saw it too. Not physically, but in Rex's reaction. The dog was reliving it. The crash site, the escape, the moment everything changed. And then another flash. A man standing at the facility. Daniel Voss, watching, not moving, observing. Luke's stomach dropped. "That's it," he whispered. "That's what he saw." Rex staggered. Luke ran forward. "Rex!" But the dog didn't collapse this time. He stopped right in the middle of the runway and slowly lifted his head. The beeping device cracked louder. Beep, beep, beep. But Rex didn't respond to it anymore, because something inside him had separated. Memory from trigger, past from control. And now he stood completely still, looking at the men approaching him. And then he did something no one expected. He barked once, but it wasn't panic. It wasn't warning. It was final. A signal. And then Rex turned toward Luke, just for a second. And Luke understood everything. Not through words, through certainty. The dog wasn't just remembering anymore. He was choosing. Luke whispered, "What are you showing me?" Rex turned back toward the runway, toward the men, toward the device. And then he ran, but not away, straight into them. Hale shouted, "Stop him!" But Luke shouted louder, "Don't!" because he understood now. The memory wasn't just information. It was location. And Rex had finally found the last piece. The SUVs moved too late. The men reacted too slow. Rex hit the man with the device full speed. The device dropped, skidded across the runway. The beeping changed instantly. Erratic, broken. Then silence. Everything stopped. For half a second, nothing moved. Then the device sparked, and the men around it froze, like something had been cut. A connection severed. Hale whispered, "Signal lost." Dr. Cross stared. "It was controlling them." Claire shook her head. "No, it was controlling him." Luke ran to Rex. The dog lay still, breathing heavily, but conscious, watching the sky now. "Calm again." Finally, Luke dropped to his knees. "You did it." Rex blinked slowly, then rested his head against Luke's chest. And for the first time, there was no growl, no tension, no fear. Just peace. Behind them, chaos erupted as the SUVs tried to retreat. Agents moved in. Hale was shouting orders, but Luke barely heard it because Rex was still looking at him, and in that look there was something like closure, like a final memory settling into place. Then faintly, Rex let out one last soft breath and closed his eyes. Luke froze. "Hey! No, Rex." But the dog didn't move. Claire knelt beside him. "He's not gone." Dr. Cross checked gently, then nodded slowly. "He's resting." Luke held him tighter, and for a long time he didn't speak, because everything had finally made sense. Not the conspiracy, not the corruption, but the dog, the truth Emily had written. We rescued each other. Now Luke understood. Rex hadn't just carried a memory. He had carried a burden meant to end something larger than any of them, and he had done it silently, faithfully, completely. Hours later, as dawn broke over Wyoming, the airfield was quiet again. Evidence secured. Men arrested. Systems exposed. Names beginning to fall. But Luke stayed where he was, Rex still beside him, watching the sunrise together, and for the first time in 8 years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt finished.